right. Good morning.
Morning.
So, Cam Neal here with the Global Shapers, which is a sub-outlet of the World Economic Forum. And we're putting together a dialogue series on the future of education. So, I'm sitting here with Michael Forbes, who is a prominent owner, operator, entrepreneur in Victoria, BC. We're sitting in Ageless Living, which he is the owner and operator of. He also is running Forbes Pharmacy, which he started out with quite a while ago. So, Michael, to start us out, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of your education and how that has applied to the areas that you brought it to, and then maybe we'll go into the reasons and the things that you're looking into now to re-educate yourself.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I started out in Kamloops, it was rough for town growing up, and I wanted to get out of there. So I was athletic. I did well in school from grade 10 on. I had to work at it. It wasn't something that was, I didn't have the study skills in the beginning, so I really had to work at my education. And then I got a scholarship to UBC, went there, and I really wanted to be a pilot, so I'd fly in the summers, and my friends all applied to pharmacy school. So I kind of jumped on their coattails and figured, hey, I'll apply too. And I was one of the few that got in. It's ironic how that works. And then I would still fly aviation in the summers wanting to be a pilot. And I almost dropped out of school halfway through. A lot of work. Pharmacy school is really hard.
Right.
Lots of hours, lots of labs, and it wasn't something that I was passionate at the time. Academia and I were not good friends because I'm a visual learner and I can read quickly.
So you would say that you saw the education that you went into as the thing you needed to do rather than the thing that you wanted to do?
Yeah, it was my plan B, and plan B turned into plan A. So
and plan B turned into plan A, turned into your enterprise.
And ironically, I'm looking at buying a float plane for myself. So, just because of my dream of being a pilot that didn't work out the way I wanted it to then.
The passion survives.
Yes, the passion survives.
That's great. That's awesome. So you were in school for pharmacy, and how did that go?
Academia is tough because of its very old school with here you got to show up to these classes and listen to a prof reading to you. I'm not an audio learner. I'm a visual learner, so I like to read, and I'm a fast reader.
Right.
So school to me was a big waste of time because I would be, why am I sitting here in class when this guy's reading to me a story, basically, and I felt like I was 5 years old, and thanks, but I can take these notes home and I'll be done in 20 minutes. I don't need to sit here for an hour.
So you were right on it from the get-go with wanting to really see how you could make things apply, and maybe that goes back to your passion.
I actually skipped a lot of my classes, and I got the highest mark on one of the courses, and pharmacy is 1 in 9 get in. It's one of the hardest programs to get into, and one of the courses I was really interested in, and I got the highest marks in the class. And the dean called me into the office and says, well, what's going on? You're a back row bandit, never go to class. How did you do this? I'm like, it was just something I was really interested in. And then they wanted me to head up the distance education program, and I didn't have the time to do that, I guess. And I did not want to, I didn't, at that age, I wasn't very studious into academia and the rules and everything.
Right.
Now, years later, I'm always reading, I'm always going to seminars, I'm always going to conferences. I'm heavily involved in anti-aging medicine treatments. Heavily involved in the cannabis education, building education. And so I love to learn, but the learning that is done when you're an adult willfully is much faster because they have trade shows are a great place to learn because you can do academia in the classroom, and it's tailored much more about just getting the knowledge out to you. Right. It's a faster learning process, I find. Okay. And then you can go to the vendors and talk about what you've learned in the course and then learn how to apply it real time to your business.
Interesting. So it seems as though that is a much more streamlined approach than what you had as an experience in the past.
100%.
So,
and it's, you put your money where your mouth is. So when you're in business and you're spending money on things, you want to know really badly every nook and cranny about that thing you're going to buy and about that knowledge.
And so, like the current state of affairs.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well,
money
that's
money
awesome.
helps. Like when you're spending your money, you want to really research it, so you're a bit more focused. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's a great introduction. Okay. So I've prepared a few questions here that should help us dig a little bit deeper into the experience of education and creation in the 21st century.
Cool.
Yeah. So we'll begin. So as an entrepreneur, what do you see as your most important responsibilities and your biggest challenges?
I mean, entrepreneurs are typically creating new jobs, so they're taking on risk and kind of showing the way for other entrepreneurs to kind of learn from. I love Elon Musk's approach that, and I'm not comparing myself to him at all, but I love how he is.
I think we all do to some degree.
Yeah, even if I loved his one, I'll mess it up, but he said something along the lines that if he fails, at least he's shown how far he made it, so maybe another company can pick up where he left off, change, adapt to his mistakes and keep going.
Right.
And so I think that's really important for entrepreneurs to, show the way, and even if you fail, other people will learn from your mistakes.
So it's really that attitude of there might not be something that's created enough here that it will actually be successful, but there is still a possibility to push things forward enough that it's going to be relevant and worth it.
Yeah, entrepreneurship is very creative, so it's not black and white. And part of academia is very black and white. Like they start you off with, whether it's learning biology, you're starting off with plant cells, and then you're going into the human cells, and it kind of evolves that way. Whereas entrepreneurship's much more outside of the box thinking. It's very much more creative. So you're piecing together different trains of thought and different people to make something work.
Right.
And then the second part,
so
the biggest challenge is definitely red tape.
Yes, red tape.
Government regulation, red tape.
Okay,
100%.
Interesting. Within that frame of the red tape that government and legislation poses on us, what do you see as what would streamline that process overall?
The problem is our culture with, if you are in our culture and in business or in anything, the regulators are rewarded. So if you're a junior regulator at the city or at some board, you're going to want to advance in your career by saying, hey, what about this problem? And then so your bosses in the regulatory office are going to be like, great job, Johnny, we're going to promote you. And so in their culture, they're empowered to find more rules to impose.
So it's this culture like where there's a continuous ramifying effect of having the same culture be promoted rather than maybe really seeing what's out there and what could be possible.
Yeah, because it's liability too, and I get it. Like, say if you have an uncovered manhole or a well, right, and you say you have 1,000 wells out there, and one person hurts himself in this well, well then they put a blanket liability on all the wells have to have this, process to prevent that. When really maybe it was a freak accident or something, but then everybody is with that same regulation on it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's kind of an issue with creating an abstraction when what we really need is dynamic approaches to being aware of what's actually happening.
So it's just one thing that in a mature business or market, you're going to have much more time to find all the liabilities, and then the lawyers and regulators are going to keep closing all those loopholes to have it tighter and tighter and tighter. So it's like the airline industry, right? Like we don't have very many crashes anymore because if it's so heavily regulated for a reason, right? But if you're an entrepreneur trying to get into the aviation industry, it's pretty tough because everything's just a strict box how you're doing it, right? And so I really like newer emerging markets. They're riskier, but there's also, because of it's new, there's not as much regulation and red tape in it. So if you look at cannabis, right, it's now everything's getting designed and going, right? So it's a much faster moving area.
So maybe we're seeing that in the past, and even still in the present to some degree, that the role of legislation and government has been to what? What would you say that their role has
totally
been?
It's totally to protect the public,
right?
Which is rightfully so.
To protect the public specifically.
But it can become, as an entrepreneur, super costly and time sucking and hard to deal with. So it's a huge part of my job is working with the regulatory bodies to comply, and that takes a lot of time and money and resources. And so as an entrepreneur, like, you'll talk to a lot of them, and I bet you a lot of them will say similar things. Like it's a part of the business, but it in certain markets I won't even touch because the red tape is too high.
Right. Okay. So it may be that there's a lot of different correlations here with different areas that are human creations. And that being said, an example would be maybe how we've done medicine in the past versus how we're now doing medicine. May correlate to how we've done law in the past and how we will do law in the future, being that we've had much more of a reactive approach in the past, and that we're seeking to be more proactive and maybe omni-considerate in the future.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. How would you say that we are doing with having that
It's evolving
approach?
really quick, which is exciting. The internet is responsible for that, so as more information is shared at a faster rate, more ideas are able to circulate and get to better solutions quicker. And so we are changing the world. Like cryptocurrencies is a good example of how quickly that's game changing the financial world. Right? The internet was a game changer to change how we share information. Medicine is under a big change as well. Cannabis is under a big change as well. It's pretty exciting. It's the best time to be an entrepreneur, for sure. Yeah.
That's really great to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe with the understanding of how much infrastructure we have right now for things like education, what would you say would be the new focus of those infrastructure? Because maybe in the past it's been to educate a certain way that was preparing people for the future. But as we can see now, we're much more connected to the now with what's occurring, with how fast technology is advancing, and with how fast everything is advancing in our society. So what would you say is a reframe for institutions and infrastructure that have been educating for the future rather than the now?
Oh, education. I read an article, I'll muddle the facts, but it was something along the lines of most educational institutions won't make it another 15 years.
Yeah.
Because you've got to pay these huge fees to go to a physical building where you can open your laptop and download the data and read it right then.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my education that I do is distance education through online courses. And it's great. You can do it at your own pace, you can do it wherever. The instructors are more flexible with, understanding work and time flows. I think universities and education is going to change dramatically over the next decade.
Interesting. It's all getting sucked into the phones.
Yeah, totally.
Essentially. Yeah. And next to the microscopic technology that goes inside of us to just inform us that way.
Yeah, totally.
Okay,
yeah.
So question number 2. Do you see yourself as contributing to the building of something greater than yourself? And if so, what is it that we are building?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm definitely, part of the change of medicine to more of a preventative approach. I've been really seeing that in the last year, where a lot more specialists and physicians are coming to me wanting to open up private clinics and get more education. I've never seen it at a higher rate than now. Definitely in the cannabis area as well. There's so much unknown still that needs to be researched and documented, and working with physicians and healthcare providers to get more information about that is really key. So I'm definitely spearheading a lot of that. And then building
maybe like as a collective, if we were to look at ourselves as like humanity or as Canada or as these kinds of things, how would you see that as what we're building?
100%. Like Canada is amazing with new innovation, and we're going to be the first country federally licensed to grow and produce and retail cannabis, and the export licenses that we're doing are massive, where we're supplying other governments. And so the States is not as research friendly in cannabis as Canada is, so Canada's poised to be a leader in that. So it's very exciting. Very exciting. And same in medicine too, like the preventative, the Americans are much further ahead of us in preventative health and anti-aging medicine. So I do a lot of my training there.
And maybe even things like the emergence of biohacking and nootropics to some degree?
Nootropics don't have the same evidence as some of other technologies do.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
What are those other technologies?
The neurointegrator is much better than nootropics overall, much safer.
Right.
I'm a pharmacist, and so drugs have a huge benefit for a lot of people, but also non-drug measures are very important as well, and so oftentimes they overget looked.
Specifically, there is a huge impact, and we don't necessarily care for to reach into what is really the extent of that impact.
Yeah, it's a combination of many different modalities to help you be your best, right? And so it's not just drugs, it's not just eating right, it's not just going to the gym, it's not just using technology to help, hack your body. It's a combination of all of it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. Cool. And I guess that would tie into the understanding that there's like those four influencers of the outcome of our the quality of our life, which are like our mind and our body and our relationships and our environment. And maybe it's like you're saying that we need to be considerate of all of those and have that balance to understand how to really have emerge the consciousness that we want to be putting out into the world.
100%. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Okay.
For sure.
Back to education. Some people say, just do it. Just create it. While others of the same breath might speak, just get an education. Right? It may be that there is a spectrum of opinion here. Where on that spectrum would you place yourself?
I do a bit of both. I always like to educate myself I always like to educate myself as much as I can before I start spending a lot of money in a certain field.
Right.
So I will invest in my own education. I'd never think that that's a waste of money. I think it's some of the best money you can spend is on your own education.
Okay.
But it's nice to kind of marry the two up, and so that once you have enough knowledge of one part of the business that you're getting into, you can start building and investing in that while you're still learning.
Essentially, it gets easier to see what are the most relevant things that you should be learning.
Yeah, so learn as much so that you're not going to risk the capital you're investing, so it's going to be safe, and then do it. Start getting into it, because if you can't learn everything in a book or in your mind. You have to start doing it, because certain problems will come, and you have to be resourceful, and then it teaches you, I got to learn a lot more about this.
And maybe
and then you overcome that problem and you keep going. So it's a bit of both.
So it's maybe about like enhancing your resourcefulness only to the degree that you feel you need to be having a safe impact to start out, and then really digging into how is the resourcefulness what is the resourcefulness that I need right now in order to create the next thing that is going to have emerged what I wanted.
That's a great way to put it. Very articulate.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like being both a student and an autodidact are both relevant then. Yeah.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. You're always learning. You always got to be a student, but you've got to. If you're just learning all the time, well, then you're called an academic, and those who can't do teach, right?
Right.
And so you've got to, at some point, say, okay, my education is enough to take that leap of faith and go, and then enhance my learning as I go. You don't want to suffer from analysis paralysis for your whole life. At some point, you got to call it a day and say, go.
Yeah. Where does the action begin?
Exactly. And that's where a lot of people get hung up.
Right, and that's when things really start to matter.
Well, because then if you're always just stuck in the learning field, others are going to pass you, and you're going to miss your window to actually get involved.
Would you say that there are certain things that are really great for stepping into that creative mode of being?
Self-awareness, trusting yourself, having the self-confidence, being resourceful.
Yeah.
You have to have a bit of humility as well to ask for help all the time.
Okay. Interesting that you say being resourceful as opposed to becoming resourceful.
Yeah, I think it's a bit. I'm very resourceful because I've had a lot of experience with a lot of problems, and so you just have to learn to overcome problems, and that helps you refine your resourcefulness.
Wonderful. Okay, so we'll move right along here. 2 more questions. What would you see as the goal of education in the 21st century for entrepreneurs, and how could it best be reached? And we may have touched on this already with kind of learning what you need to learn in order to really get going on the project or the innovation that you're really seeing as the thing that you want to be bringing to the world. But what would you see as that goal of education?
That's a tough one. I think everybody's different, and so it's, again, back to knowing yourself.
Yep.
And then, like, if you're an auditorial learner, well, you should be crushing it on audio tape, right?
Right.
Why force yourself to go and sit in a class when you're not a visual learner, right? And if you're a visual learner, like, why waste your time with going to lectures and listening to some prof drivel on at a, snail's pace when you can read it 10 times faster?
Interesting. So it sounds. Sorry. Yeah.
It's knowing yourself and how you want to learn, and I think everybody will develop their own. You can learn almost anything off YouTube now, right? On the internet. So that's a pretty good place to start, and then asking for help too, because if you're only just trying to learn what you know, you're so limited. Your own biases will prevent you. You need to reach out to somebody and be like, hey, how do you look at this problem and how would you solve it?
And there's that whole other spectrum of what we don't know. And how do we find that? And maybe that's a creative process where you're doing that, reaching out to other people, or opening up 16 different tabs on Chrome.
Yeah, exactly, right.
To find what is that you didn't know that's going to actually be so helpful for you.
I think a lot of people too are, it's very easy to connect with people. So if you see a good article and you want to know more information, well, email that person or phone them up. Hey, I don't understand this. Help me out. It doesn't have to be a big formal thing. Just ask your question. People are, knowledge should be shared, and people are very forthcoming with sharing knowledge. It's amazing. You just have to ask for it.
Wow. Okay. So one more thing, and then we'll close it out. People have been saying that education is a lifelong pursuit for quite a while. Would you say from your experience that the pace of that education is accelerating?
100%.
And if so, in what ways?
In business, it's changed so much. One of the hardest things I've found is probably the amount. So as a boss, you have to be the amount of things you have to be educated in on a higher and higher level all the time is amazing. You have to know a lot about HR, you have to know a lot about finance, you have to know a lot about construction, you have to know a lot about logistics, you have to know a lot about communications, you have to know a lot about marketing. Marketing is one of the, it's been crazy how much you need a team of people just to be relevant in marketing. You have to know a lot about,
Right.
you have to know a little about a lot of different things in each of those topics. And so the amount of knowledge that you have to have to compete in business is way more than it was 10 years ago. Way more. Like back before the internet, marketing would be like you print, you call up a newspaper, hey, I'd like to run an ad. You don't have to worry about any of the analytics or if it worked or not, really. You're measuring is, did my phone ring? Or you do TV or radio or some flyers. Like there was only 4 main mediums where you could pick from. Now you got, 20 different options just online to pick from. Right? It's a lot more in depth now.
How would you say, what would be your strategy for finding focus in all of that mass of data?
With marketing, a
Yeah.
lot of it's still, you got to pick a lane, like understand who your avatar is. So if it's a younger demographic you're going after, you would want to be leaning more towards, mobile phones and apps that are relevant to them. An older demographic still is what they're used to, right? So there's still
Right.
a medium for print
Radio
and TV,
and
yeah. So knowing who your market is really important. I had to learn the hard way a lot with that, and then you have to learn how to manage these people. So I had to learn a little bit about about what all these marketers do. Because it's such a new field that everybody's kind of learning at the same time, and so as a boss, you have to learn what the employee's doing so you can manage them. If you don't know what they're doing, how do you manage that?
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so we'll wrap it up now. So thank you, Michael, for
No worries,
joining me.
man.
And I guess maybe we've come to the synthesis conclusion that how to educate yourself in the 21st century is maybe to get to know yourself, to know how to ask the right questions, to know your humanity, and to get involved. Thank you, Michael,
All right.
for joining
Thanks,
me.
Ian. Okay, thanks, buddy.